Hello and welcome to another edition of Eastern Europe Review, the program that talks about countries east of Poland, mainly Russia, Belarus and Ukraine. This is a common project of Belsat TV and TVP World. My name is Igor Kulej, and in this episode we are going to take a look at the following stories. The Russian Orthodox Church at the service of Russian Special Services.
The very name of the Department for External Church Relations speaks of the nature of its work.
How are the Russian neo-Nazi armed formations fighting in the war against Ukraine?
I am a Nazi. Yes, I am a Nazi.
A theater actress from Moscow helps Ukrainians in Odesa and asks for political asylum in Ukraine.
I want to believe that I will not be forcibly returned to my home country because they will just put me in jail.
According to Swiss media, the head of the Russian Orthodox Church was engaged in espionage for the USSR in the 1970s in Geneva. Kirill is not the only clergyman who has cooperated with Soviet special services. How does sacred espionage work? You will find out in our next story.
This is the Patriarch of Moscow and all Russia, Kirill. He was a Soviet spy. At least, this is what the Soviet media have revealed based on declassified archives of the secret services. Vladimir Gundyayev was spying for the KGB in the 1970s under the pseudonym Mikhailov. It was in Geneva where Gundyayev in 1971 became the representative of the Moscow Patriarchate at the World Council of Churches. At that time, the priest was just 24 years old. Gundyayev held this position until 1994. During this entire time, Agent Mikhailov allegedly had to ensure that the council criticized not the USSR, but the USA. Unluckily for him, other clergy had been warned of the Soviet danger.
We were warned about these priests because they were KGB agents. Whenever I spoke to Kirill, I always had the feeling that he was looking for information. He was very friendly, but asked a lot of questions about the exile and the clergy.
In essence, Gundyayev's job in Switzerland was to make friends and ask questions. Journalists had been writing about his connection with the special services for a long time. Another proof of him being a spy is that the former consul at the Soviet embassy in Geneva, Vadim Melnikov, in his autobiography, called the priest a KGB officer. In general, many priests admitted to working for the KGB during the Soviet years. This was called the fight for peace.
The future Patriarch Gundyayev embarked on a remarkable career. By the age of 30, he was already a bishop and special representative in Geneva. Is it possible to imagine that the special envoy in Geneva did not fight for peace?
The future patriarch was assisted by Nikodym Rotov, who was engaged in the external relations of the Russian Orthodox Church. He was the person to anoint Gundyayev to serve God. According to data from the KGB archives, Rotov was a church agent of the KGB with the pseudonym Sviatoslav.
The very name of the Department for External Church Relations speaks of the nature of its work.
Agent Mikhailov continued his mentor's work. At first, Vladimir Gundyayev actively built the connections of the Russian Orthodox Church abroad, but year by year he got worse and worse.
Gundyayev failed as a diplomat. I can remind you of his visit to Bulgaria, where he was referred to as having almost the same power as an extremely authorized ambassador. He openly became unpleasant towards the Bulgarian authorities and, in fact, turned Bulgaria, a region historically friendly to Russia, into an enemy, an adversary. He showed disdain towards the Bulgarian president by saying, "We once saved you from the Turks. Now you owe us for life," which caused a very negative reaction back then.
Patriarch Kirill himself, his relatives and representatives of the Russian Orthodox Church don't want to comment on the accusations of espionage for the KGB. Swiss journalists also found out that the current head of the Russian Orthodox Church could have been involved in the tobacco and oil business in the 1990s, as well as in non-transparent real estate deals. Vladimir Gundyayev, became patriarch in 2009. Since then, he has been the subject of many scandals related to business, politics, and luxury goods. Patriarch Kirill has been supporting a full-scale war in Ukraine, which is why he was put on the Western sanctions list. But this didn't prevent the Orthodox priest from maintaining ties with Switzerland. It is believed that Gundyayev has a chalet near Zurich. In addition, he has many friends in Switzerland who are businessmen and who give him expensive gifts like a Moscow apartment. One of the churches in the suburbs of Geneva is headed by the nephew of Agent Mikhailov, Mikhail Gundyayev. This man gives assurances that his uncle is not a spy, but he may be under the strict control of the KGB. And after all, the watches worn by Patriarch Kirill, worth $30,000, were also made in Switzerland. It was noticed in a photo on Moscow Patriarchy website that Kirill had been wearing such a watch during a visit to Ukraine in 2009. But later, the photo was retouched and the watch disappeared from Kirill's hand. However, it was forgotten to delete the reflection of the watch on the table, which could still be seen in the photo.
Igor Mangushev, call sign Berek, fighting on the Russian side, has died this week. Mangushev was a man with an extremely murky biography. Once he was a member of the Bright Rus nationalist movement whose members staged attacks and beatings of migrants. This is not the first time that a far-right Russian nationalist has been involved in the war against Ukraine, despite the Kremlin's alleged denazification claims.
I am a Nazi. Yes, I am a Nazi. I will not go into depth. A nationalist, a patriot, some sort of imperialist. I openly say I am a Nazi. I can even raise my hand in the Nazi salute.
Alexei Milchakov, now the commander of the Russisch Sabotage and Assault Reconnaissance Group, is now fighting in Ukraine. The man appeared in the public space back in 2011. In his social networks, he published a photo of a dead puppy, which according to him, he killed himself. In 2017, journalists found Milchakov in Syria with a Wagner private military company.
For my age, I am in ill health. I became more aggressive, smarter, and meaner.
Rusisch is the most combat-ready unit on the side of the Russian army, as they describe themselves, mostly because of huge donations. Russian independent media suggested that a large number of transfers to Rusisch came from darknet marketplaces selling drugs, and from Rusisch itself, reverse transfers were made to anonymous drugstores. Journalists asked Rusisch to comment on this information on their social media, and that's how they responded.
As for the drug business you mentioned, which supports its people and the army, then honor and praise to them. If this is true, they are real patriots of Russia. By the way, it is also possible to cooperate with them in the area of obtaining painkillers for the needs of the unit. So here's a hint for you.
In their response to journalists, they also self-confidently noted that their work could not be carried out if it was not in the interests of the country and the people. And in this regard, they are allowed to do everything they need. This is Yevgeny Raskazov, also known as Topaz, another member of Rusisch. Like Milchakov, Raskazov manages not only to fight in Ukraine, but also to actively maintain a Telegram channel where he is not hiding his Nazi views. For example, on the 20th of April, he published his congratulations to Hitler without naming him.
He taught us to love our homeland and never be afraid of the enemy, no matter how strong the enemy is. He taught us to fight for the ancestral lands that historically belonged to our people, and despite the fact that he is no longer with us, his work and word lives on in our hearts.
In his other publications, he writes that it is possible to arrange a new Bucha, meaning the killing of civilians in Ukraine. Here's the latest photo posted on Rusisch's official Telegram channel. Joyful Milchakov in the company of State Duma deputies, one of the leaders of the separatists, Alexander Borodai, and a smiling Vitaly Milonov, who is known for his extremely conservative views. And here is what is written under the photo.
The gentleman handed over ammunition to the unit. Well, the hunt is in full swing.
It turns out that the Russian ultra-right has been participating in the war for the purpose of the proclaimed denazification of Ukraine. The Kremlin knows about their views, but it seems it does not worry the authorities enough to do anything about it.
Anastasia Ivanova from Moscow, who has publicly condemned Russian troops' invasion of Ukrainian territory, faces imprisonment in Russia for actively supporting Ukraine. Because of her position, law enforcers have also been observing the girl's relatives. And Anastasia, who is currently in Odesa, is facing criminal charges herself.
For almost a year, Anastasia Ivanova has been living under a new surname, Voloshina. She took it from her Ukrainian great-grandmother, and she also shortened her name to Stasia. It was a reaction to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, which she had learned about in Odesa. That's where she's been since 2020. The woman had to leave her homeland because of constant pressure and disagreement with Vladimir Putin's policies.
I got into trouble at work under the pretext of explanatory talks and the presence of some kind of penalties and forced participation in United Russia Party festivities. They began to actively propagandize which views are right and which unacceptable.
Stasia says the final straw was a visit from the district police officer. The policeman promised to give her a hard time if she did not change her political views. Without thinking twice, Stasia packed her bags and left for Odesa. But the problems did not end there. The Russian authorities started putting pressure on the young woman through her parents.
They broke into the house and scared my mother to death. They said that it was because of what I did, and that if I ever decided to go back, they would just arrest me at the border and charge me with treason.
Stasia is an actress. She graduated from the Russian Institute of Theatre Arts in Moscow and used to perform in a musical theatre. She was also involved in public activities and was a member of Navalny's headquarters, for which she was constantly pursued. Now she's doing everything she can to avoid going back. She has applied for political asylum in Ukraine.
They cannot deport me to Russia. Even if they don't give me refugee status, they have to escort me to the border and exile me from Ukraine. But it will most likely be to Moldova or somewhere else. So I want to believe that I will not be forcibly returned to my home country, because they will just put me in jail.
Though her status is pending, the woman has been active on social media and has been telling her fellow citizens the truth about what is happening in Ukraine for almost a year now. However, not everyone wants to hear her, let alone understand her.
There was a great deal of negativity, including from people I used to think of as friends. In the first weeks of the war, acquaintances and relatives, several people called me Ukro-Nazi.
In Odesa, not only did Stasia continue her social life, but also found a theatre troupe where, among other things, she has been performing in the Ukrainian language. And interestingly enough, the young woman speaks it almost like a native speaker. Sometimes, however, difficulties arise.
At the beginning of spring, when we started working, I got this somewhere in the text. And this is the combination of ts that is soft, then another e, or rather, then there's an e and then e. That was very hard, of course. And now it's going smoothly, and it's okay.
Stasia practices the Ukrainian language not only on the theatre stage, but in life too.
I try speaking Ukrainian everywhere as much as possible now. Not because I am scared, but because I am ashamed. It hurts because I couldn't influence this situation.
On the other hand, the woman understands that she cannot change anything. Neither could others who disagree with the policies of the Russian president and his staff.
There is such a dictatorship there. On paper, it doesn't exist, of course, but troops are put against such people there.
It is difficult for the young woman to say what might be ahead for Russia, but with regard to Ukraine, Stasia has no doubt about its future.
All those who say brotherly nations are talking nonsense. Those are people who probably have not lived here and there. Ukrainians are different people with different mindsets. A European country that should definitely become a member of the EU. That's why, emotionally, Ukrainians have already won. But we will wait until we have reclaimed all the territories.
And that's it for today. Eastern Europe Review will be back next Sunday. Thank you for being with us. Keep watching TVP World and stand with Ukraine.